and welcome to Defeating the Feminist Frame, presented by myself, Professor Hamster, and my colleague, Mia. Defeating the Feminist Frame. Today's episode is Patriarchy is Male Oppression. Feminists like to frame men being in positions of authority as empowerment of men as a group. As a counter-argument, many people offer women being the majority of the electorate, women winning as often when they run for positions in government as men, or the glass seller. All of these arguments are, once again, allowing feminism to control the frame by accepting the unproven premise that being in authority is actually a benefit. On a recent video, an individual posted an example of female supremacist triumphalism. An article about the rebuilding of Rwanda after the genocide that bragged about how women not only had rebuilt, but did it better than the men who had been engaging in so-called oppression of them before. Omitted from mention was the tremendous violence women had inflicted during the genocide and their relative immunity from being victims of said violence. Also omitted was the reason why women experienced a greater survival rate. It was because of the very patriarchal society feminists spew venom for. If it had been a truly egalitarian society, equal numbers of men and women would have been slaughtered. And if Rwanda had been a real matriarchy, the people being hacked apart would have been mostly women. Let's imagine for a moment a formerly matriarchal Rwanda and the newly liberated male survivors dancing on the mass graves of their former protectors as they rebuild a better society without those matriarchal shit ladies. Yep. The only reason women were spared was due to patriarchal norms that make men the appropriate victims of violence, and then we turn around and blame men for the very norms that protected women in the first place. Why do those patriarchal norms protect women? Men are expected to assume positions of power and authority in patriarchy. If they don't compete successfully for positions of authority, they are socially ostracized or even killed. And when you set a group of people to compete with each other, by definition, they lose sympathy for each other. Each man gains power and prestige at the expense of other men, and also at the expense of a shared identity that would form the basis of caring about and benefiting other men. Therefore, saying men as a whole benefit from a tiny minority of men being in charge is an ugly lie. Those men have earned their authority at the expense of other men and to the detriment of all men as recipients of compassion when they are in need. In simple terms, we prefer people with perceived agency to suffer over people without perceived agency. In fact, we might say that the Rwandan genocide proves that patriarchy hurts men too. Or, to be more specific, patriarchy hacks men apart with machetes and restricts women from taking part in those activities that would make hacking women apart with machetes more socially acceptable. Thus, the expectation that men compete to assume positions of authority upon pain of death or banishment is actually disenfranchisement of men as a group relative to women as a group who are empowered to retain their social dominance as the expected recipients of provision and protection. Therefore, when a feminist says, but men are 99% of the people in power, as a men's issues advocate, you respond with, exactly. Being forced to assume a position of authority means being disempowered when it comes to commanding sympathy. And that's a men's rights issue, not a feminist one. Congrats, you have now successfully challenged the feminist frame.